Hello and welcome to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm Marie Kato. Poland announced today the closure of the Russian consulate in Krakow. The move follows the emergence of evidence indicating that Moscow was directly involved in an arson attack in Warsaw last year. Polish authorities say the decision underscores the gravity of the security breach and the need to respond firmly. Our reporter Sasha Farbach was at the Foreign Ministry in Warsaw and has more.
Now, today marks the one-year anniversary of the destruction in an arson attack in one of Warsaw's largest shopping centers. Now, on this day as well, Radosław Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, announced in London he would be closing down the Russian consulate as a consequence in Krakow. Now, this follows another move just last year in around October when Polish authorities also closed in Poznan the consulate there. Now, on Sunday, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has said that there is irrefutable evidence that the security services here in Poland have that point in the direction of Russia's involvement in that arson attack. Now, when questioning authorities here during a press conference on what kind of evidence that was, they were not able to present that publicly. But nevertheless, that is a policy they've stuck to, that there is evidence according to authorities. Now, in that meeting in London, Foreign Minister Sikorski had some strong words to say about all this.
We need each other in the security area, and not just defense, broadly understood security area. You may not have picked up what I said in Polish. An hour ago, I took the decision to close down the Russian consulate in Krakow. This is because our Justice Ministry and security services have found proof that they were behind an act of arson in Poland a year ago. This was a huge fire of a shopping mall in Warsaw, in which just by sheer luck nobody was hurt. This is completely unacceptable. So the Russian consulate will have to leave. They'll have one more, and if these attacks continue, we'll take further action.
And also here in Warsaw, the foreign minister had a chance to speak to the Undersecretary of State here in Warsaw at the Foreign Ministry and asked her basically what is next in terms of what Poland's reaction could be following potentially new other hybrid attacks.
We hope that this is the ultimate step in the process of Polish reactions towards a hybrid war Russia is actually undertaking, a hybrid campaign Russia is undertaking here in Poland. We hope we won't be forced to take next steps.
Now, there's continuing ongoing investigations. Now, already there's a person that is being investigated for another attack and involvement in last year in a separate attack. And this follows a whole row of various different hybrid threats now, looking at pressures from the eastern border in Belarus, to looking at arson attacks, looking at other suspicious activities, not just here in Poland, but also into the Baltic states. And authorities are investigating there as well, and across Europe. Now, it comes also as an intense time, just a few days away, Polish presidential elections. So Poland wants to send a clear signal to the Kremlin that they're ready for anything. Sasha Farbach for TVP World in Warsaw.
Poland is closing the Russian consulate in Krakow, citing direct evidence of Russian involvement in sabotage operations on its territory. The move marks a sharp escalation in tensions between Warsaw and Moscow. Our reporter Alexandra Bulenda is in Krakow with the latest on this developing story.
The decision has been made. The Russian consulate behind me will no longer operate on Polish soil. And here in Krakow, now this controversy surrounding its presence didn't start with Monday's headlines. Now, since the outbreak of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the continued functioning of this consulate right behind me in the heart of Krakow has sparked protests, public outrage and political debate. And despite growing outrage and numerous demonstrations, the Russian presence, diplomatic presence here remained untouched until now.
As in the case of Poznan, the deadline set for Russia to close its diplomatic mission is usually no shorter than 30 days. I will repeat what the spokesman said. Today, the Russian side will receive a note informing them about the withdrawal of consent for the functioning of its diplomatic mission, specifically the Consulate General of the Russian Federation in Krakow. In accordance with the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, we are withdrawing this consent, which means that this facility must be closed.
Back in October 2024, Poland's foreign ministry ordered the closure of a Russian consulate in Poznań. Now, in retaliation, Moscow shut down the Polish consulate in St. Petersburg. Many observers, in fact, saw the government's decision not to touch the Krakow's mission as well an attempt to avoid further escalation, especially given now the historic and symbolic weight of closing such an institution in a major culture city. And in fact, as recently as April, local media reported that Russian consulate continued to operate from a state-owned building, which consequently raised questions about whether Poland should continue to host the mission at all. So Manda's move is not only about the diplomatic retaliation for acts of sabotage, but it's also the culmination of a long-standing frustration over why this very building right behind me right now remained open for so long, despite widespread opposition. From Krakow for TVP World, Alexandra Bulenda.
The EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas says allies need to continue applying pressure onto the Kremlin so that Russian President Vladimir Putin accepts a 30-day ceasefire proposal. It comes off the back of senior European heavyweights such as Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk holding court with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Saturday to find the best way forward for peace. More from our EU correspondent Angela Skujins in Brussels.
The European Union's High Representative Kaja Kallas has touched down in London to meet her counterparts from the Weimar Plus political group to discuss ongoing support for Ukraine and put the pressure on Russia to accept that 30-day ceasefire proposal that was pitched over the weekend. Now she will be joined by Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski, as well as representatives from the UK, Italy, France, as well as other European heavy hitters. So let's take a listen to what Kaja Kallas had to say on the doorsteps of her arrival and what the EU is prepared to do if Russia doesn't follow suit.
Well, I think it is clear to everybody that we need to put the pressure on Russia because they are playing games. And in order to put the pressure, we have to use the tools that we have. And this is one of the tools. And therefore, I really welcome the sanctions package that Senator Lindsey Graham has put forward together with his Democratic counterpart.
Now, the sanctions that Kaja Kallas is referring to are a US package described as some as bone-crushing. The aim there is for Washington to target countries that import Russian goods, such as oil and petroleum, with 500% tariffs. We have also just received an update that on Monday, member states warmly, or most of them, warmly received a European Commission proposal to impose further tougher sanctions on Russian individuals responsible for propping up the Kremlin's war machine. Now we're talking about at least 200 vessels now being added to that sanctions list for allegedly participating in Russia's shadow fleet, as well as others potentially responsible for human rights violations and chemical warfare. Now this sanction package is there ready to be deployed if Russia does not agree to this ceasefire proposal that was pitched by those leaders on Saturday. We're of course talking about the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk being there with that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And while we wait for Russian President Vladimir Putin to formally respond to this 30-day ceasefire proposal, which has been endorsed by that US President Donald Trump, all eyes will be on that NATO summit later in the week in Turkey. And if an outcome is not hammered out there, those leaders are of course expected to meet once again in Albania on Friday. Angela Skujins from Brussels for TVP World.
A full and unconditional ceasefire is now on the table, said Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. In his nightly address, he urged Russia to respond ahead of a high-stakes meeting set for May 15th in Turkey, where he hopes to meet President Putin face-to-face. This comes in response to Russia's proposal for direct negotiations to be held in Istanbul next week.
Tomorrow, we expect a ceasefire. This proposal is on the table. A full and unconditional ceasefire, long enough to provide the necessary basis for diplomacy, can bring peace much closer. Ukraine has been proposing this for a long time, and our partners have been proposing it. The whole world is talking about it. We expect a clear answer from Russia. Russia will still have to end the war. The killing must end. The Ukrainian forces will be ready to respond in a mirror image. To make it fair, we have repeatedly heard from our partners that they're ready to increase sanctions against Russia if Putin refuses to cease fire. We will see. And we in Ukraine have no problem negotiating. We are ready for any format. I will be in Turkey this Thursday, May 15th, and I am waiting for Putin in Turkey. Personally, and I hope that this time Putin will not look for reasons why he cannot do something.
Я буду в цей четвер, 15 травня, в Туреччині.
A day after Albanians went to the polls, the country is now watching closely as results begin to take shape. With EU accession, anti-corruption efforts and regional dynamics on the line, this election could mark a turning point. Let's go to our correspondent Aisha Baci in Tirana for the latest on what we know so far.
The Central Election Committee of Albania has released the preliminary results of the parliamentary election that happened Sunday, May 11th. We can see that the Socialist Party wins with 53% of the votes, securing 79 seats in the 140-seat parliament. And this is the party of incumbent Prime Minister Edi Rama, who will be securing an unprecedented fourth term in office, and he has campaigned on the promise of making Albania a member of the EU by 2030. The main opposition gets 34% of the vote, which is the Democratic Party led by Sali Berisha, who is a former president of Albania, and they have campaigned with the promise of making Albania great again, so with more nationalistic ideals and promising higher wages, higher pensions. We can also note that turnout was low at 42%, which shows a disillusionment among Albanian voters and reflecting once again the brain drain, the mass emigration that has been a challenge for Albania. We can see that with the Socialist Party winning, that Albania will be staying on the fast track to EU accession. But of course, this doesn't only depend on the Albanian political will, but also on the reforms that they will be able to make, especially in terms of governance and anti-corruption. And this will determine whether the EU will accept Albania as a new member by 2030. Reporting to you from Albania, Tirana, for TVP World, I'm Aisha Baci.
In a surprise breakthrough, the United States and China have agreed to roll back tariffs on each other's goods for an initial 90-day period. This unexpected development has eased tensions in the trade war and sent global markets soaring.
After marathon negotiations in Geneva, Switzerland, officials from the two largest economies in the world announced a significant step forward, calling the agreement a substantial progress. The new terms will take effect by May 14th, temporarily lowering the US tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, while simultaneously China will reduce its tariffs on American imports from 125% to 10%. However, US President Donald Trump's 20% levies on financial-related products will remain in place. Both sides agreed to continue discussions about their trade relationship with a framework in place for further talks.
Journalists and Vatican correspondents have reacted positively to their first meeting with Pope Leo XIV. The pontiff held a press meeting earlier in the day to introduce himself to international media.
It was remarkable for an American to hear a pope speaking like me, right? The same language and the same accent, and I thought that was amazing. And his message was very strong. He understands the media, and he is asking us to rise to a certain level. I think he's very smart about that. And it was a thrill. It was just a thrill.
I thought the messages were positive. He should have been a little more specific, mentioning, for instance, all of our colleagues, journalists who have been killed in Gaza. But beyond that, it was positive. I think he'll get along. I mean, it's still too early to say, of course, but in general, I'd say it looks like it's going to be a positive relationship.
And here we wrap up Midday Report on TVP World. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.